But let's go back to some of these comments by Senator Lindsey Graham, the Republican from South Carolina, talking about the fentanyl crisis, talking about what the U.S. needs to do to crack down now on some of these cartel operations. Of course, this comes just days after the story we have been following for the last couple of days there, those two Americans kidnapped and killed in Mexico, crossing the border right over from Brownsville, Texas, into Matamoros. So this story is still present. It's not going anywhere. Take a look at this. Lucas Tomlinson tweeted this. Former Attorney General Bill Barr was on Fox earlier. He said that the U.S. Special Operations Forces should be used to destroy the cartels in Mexico, similar to past operations in Colombia. Interesting theory, an idea there from former Attorney General Bill Barr. So let's get out to Senator Lindsey Graham speaking on this issue earlier today.
Kidnapped, tortured, and survived, and those that were killed, we believe, by Mexican drug cartels. So I'm joined here today with Senator Kennedy just to make a statement. Drug cartels in Mexico have been terrorizing Americans for decades. We're going to unleash the fury and might of the United States against these cartels. We're going to destroy their business model and their lifestyle, because our national security and the security of the United States as a whole depends on us taking decisive action. I have a two-step approach to this, but first I want to just say we've been talking about doing something against the Mexican drug cartels regarding foreign terrorist organization designation for a decade, since 2012. Senator Kennedy and I are going to join forces. We believe Democrats will be involved to label these organizations as foreign terrorist organizations under U.S. law. That's the top of the food chain. An FTO designation is the highest designation you can give a criminal terrorist enterprise that's not a nation state. What would it mean? It means that all the precursors coming for China, Chinese chemical companies and Chinese enterprises, would be subject to being prosecuted under U.S. law for providing material support to foreign terrorist organizations, something you can't do today. So we're going to open up the prosecution lane. But I'm a firm believer that the prosecution model as it exists today is not working. So what are we going to do? We're going to up the ante. We're going to designate these groups and others, if appropriate, foreign terrorist organizations under U.S. law, changing the game for those who provide assistance to them. What drives this is fentanyl. It's been a game changer. More people died in the United States from fentanyl poisoning than car wrecks and gun violence combined. Fentanyl is becoming the leading cause of death for Americans ages 18 to 45. 200 Americans die every day due to fentanyl overdoses. Fentanyl overdoses cause the equivalent of a new September 11th every 2 weeks. I think John and I believe that if there were an ISIS or Al-Qaeda cell in Mexico that lobbed a rocket into Texas, we'd wipe them off the planet. They're doing that times thousands, and our response is inadequate. 106,000 people last year died of drug overdoses, 70,000 related to fentanyl with no end in sight. We've recovered over 12,000 pounds of fentanyl at the border this year, enough to kill almost 3 billion people. Last year's 14,700 pounds. This year is almost 13,000 pounds, and we got 8 months to go. This problem is a national security threat. Fentanyl is a killer, and the people killing Americans reside out in the open in Mexico. Now, I don't know if it's a lack of will on behalf of the Mexican government to bring these cartels to bay or a lack of capability. Either way, it's the same result for the United States. Chaos, heartache, terrorism, murder, and it needs to come to an end. So we're going to do two things today. We're going to introduce legislation in the coming days and trying to make it bipartisan to designate these groups foreign terrorist organizations under U.S. law to open up more capability to go after them and their conspirators all over the world. Secondly, we're going to introduce an authorization to use military force where the United States military can go in and destroy these labs and destroy these networks if possible. Once you're designated an FTO, a terrorist organization, the second step that we'll be engaging in is give the military the authority to go after these organizations wherever they exist. Not to invade Mexico, not to shoot Mexican airplanes down, but to destroy drug labs that are poisoning Americans. Plan Colombia. Bill Clinton in 2000 passed Plan Colombia. Here's what Joe Biden said. We have an obligation in the interest of our children and the interest of the hemisphere to keep the oldest democracy in place, Colombia, to give them a fighting chance to keep from becoming a narco state. Joe Biden supported Plan Colombia in 2000. Plan Colombia allowed the United States military to partner with Colombia, their military and their drug enforcement agencies, to get in on the ground and disrupt the cocaine traffic that was poisoning America back then. Fentanyl is up to 10,000 times more lethal than the dose of morphine. Fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction. If you thought Plan Colombia was a good idea, to go to Colombia with military force to help the Colombian military to take down the cocaine narco state that existed, then how can you object to it being done in Mexico? So it's time now for Plan Mexico. It's time now to get serious and use all the tools in the toolbox, not just in the prosecution lane, not just in the law enforcement lane, but in the military lane as well. Hopefully this will change behavior of the Mexican government. Nothing would please me more than to have a meaningful partnership to take these drug cartels down and stop killing Americans. But if Mexico will not cooperate, then we're going to have to do what's in our national security interest. And let me just end with this. Mexico is a safe haven. It is a narco-terrorist state. The safe haven provides Mexican cartels the ability with impunity to deliver lethal doses of fentanyl into our nation that is the leading cause of death of Americans from 18 to 45. 4 South Carolinians went to Mexico. 2 of them are not coming back. I just talked to the sister of one of the victims. They're waiting on the body. These drug cartels are dangerous. They're lawless. American law needs to change to make sure we deal with them appropriately. And as we designate them FTOs, the next step will be to provide authorization to use military force to eradicate the Mexican drug cartels that are poisoning America. I could not have a better partner than Senator Kennedy.
Okay, so Senator Lindsey Graham there, Republican from South Carolina, joined by his colleague, Senator Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana, talking about what former Attorney General Bill Barr was also kind of proposing as well, more U.S. military intervention to go after some of these Mexican cartels. I want to put this tweet back up there. Barr says U.S. Special Operations Forces should be used to destroy the cartels in Mexico, similar to past operations in Colombia. That's his idea there. Some of the same hallmarks you just heard there from Senator Lindsey Graham. All right, I'm Andrew Kraft. In the meantime, let's just get an update on this story, where we are, where does it stand, from Fox's Bill Malugin.
2 Americans kidnapped in Mexico are now back in the U.S., recovering in a hospital here in Texas. The FBI is working with Mexican authorities to recover the bodies of 2 others who were killed in the cartel attack. And we're learning more about their ordeal. One of the 2 surviving Americans was shot in the leg. They were moved around to multiple locations, including a health clinic, to throw authorities off the trail before eventually being found in a wooden shack.
No hubo rescate.
It appears it was all a confusion. There was no ransom. We don't have an exact given number of suspects. These will be determined by the investigation.
The man guarding that shack is now behind bars, and Mexican authorities say more arrests will be coming. But with the power of cartels growing on both sides of the border, it's not clear if those ultimately responsible for the murders and kidnappings will face justice.
They have too much influence in Mexico. Now they're starting to have influence in the United States. And these people that were down there, they paid the price.
Meanwhile, Attorney General Merrick Garland says he is outraged by the incident and claims there will be consequences, with pressure building on the administration to take a harder stance against the cartels.
This event's really going to start changing how things happen with the cartels. 21 state attorney generals have already requested that they be labeled a terrorist organization.
And some lawmakers on Capitol Hill are now calling for the United States to use military force against these Mexican cartels. Reporting in Brownsville, Texas, Bill Malugin, Fox News.
Bill, thanks so much. Well, already on the books for several months now are varying different travel advisories put out by the State Department to U.S. citizens who want to travel to Mexico for whatever reason. But what if you don't heed those warnings, much like these 4 Americans who traveled there to Matamoros to get some type of plastic surgery? Let's talk about some of those legal implications even further with legal analyst Dwayne Cates joining us right now. Dwayne, thanks for being with us. I think this is a topic that's going to be of interest to many people who are watching, because we hear about some of these hot spots all around the world. The State Department issues these travel advisories. I want to put up some on the books right now for Mexico. There's a lot of them, and they're varying degrees. The, I guess, highest level is do not travel to. Then you have kind of lower contingencies, reconsider travel to, then exercise increased caution when traveling to, and the lowest, exercise normal precautions when traveling to. But if you're an American citizen and you maybe gloss over that on the State Department's website and you get into a situation that is very concerning, very unsafe in Mexico, what are your legal recriminations, recourse? What can you do? Dwayne, it looks like you are still muted there. Sorry about that.
Basically, once you enter into Mexico, you're governed by Mexican law. And the United States law doesn't follow you into Mexico. So once you cross that border, it's under U.S. law. And the warnings are just that. They're just warnings. It's kind of like the speed limit sign outside the front of my office. It says go 45. Well, it doesn't mean you can't go more than 45. It just means there may be consequences if you do. And it's the same thing with the warnings. The warnings don't come from the United States government. The warnings come, the consequences come from trouble you may find yourself in a foreign country.
So say you are a U.S. citizen traveling to Mexico in one of these, regions where there are these advisories on the books, and you do come into certain situations where you need the help of the U.S. government in whatever type of scenario. Will they hold that against you? Say you want to take legal action, you want to file a civil suit, you want to sue someone for the experience that you encountered. Do you have standing?
Well, I don't think you do, because what's happening to you is happening to you in a foreign country. There's some Supreme Court rulings about inter-country lawsuits and whether you can do that or not. It's very difficult. So, if they said it was a mild warning and you went in and you got kidnapped and beat up, you can't sue the government for not having a strong enough warning. Okay, I mean, there's some personal responsibility in this. They give you the warning, you make the decisions.
Yeah, we were talking with some experts just last night. They kind of compared some of these State Department warnings to hotspots there in Mexico to, CDC guidance. It is suggested, it is encouraged, but ultimately you cannot, or at least it is very, very hard to enforce.
It really is. And it's like, if there's a sign that says, on a stove that says hot, do not touch, and you touch it anyway, I mean, you're not going to get in trouble with the government. You're going to get your hand burned. And that's kind of the same thing that would happen here. If you go in, despite the warning, and you get in trouble, it's kind of on you. Now, they will come to get you. I mean, even if you ignore the warning and you go into Mexico and you get in some sort of trouble, contact the United States consulate, because, they're going to try to get you out. But they're not going to hold it against you. They're not going to say, well, he went in there despite the warning, leave him there. They'll come get you, but, it's on you.
Yeah. Yeah, because we did see that in this particular story where, Mexican authorities in conjunction with FBI members basically rushed out the remaining surviving 2 Americans across the border. That was very, very swift. So you're right. U.S. authorities, they're not going to leave Americans stranded abroad like we have seen. Last thoughts on this, though. Is this more of a warning to maybe deter Americans possibly from taking trips that might not be the smartest?
Well, it kind of is. I mean, you got to watch the news. You got to see what's going on. And if you're planning on going to Mexico, you probably should do some research about what's going on in the area where you're at. I mean, a lot of the vacation areas are pretty safe, and the cartels leave them alone because they don't want to kill the tourist trade because they need money in Mexico. So, but again, do some research and figure out what the warnings are and where you should go and where you should stay away from.
All right, Dwayne Cates, as always, we appreciate your insight into these stories, and we'll talk again. Thanks.
Thank you.